Okay, so welcome everybody. This is we're delighted that Ted is back again. We had some technical problems. We tried to do this in November and it didn't work. And Ted very generously gave us some more of his time, and he's back here again in December. And this is going to be a very special program. This is unusual for us because we don't normally do art programs, and I'm delighted that we're doing it. This is the last one of our Zoom programs for, well, big Zoom programs, not totally, for the 2021. In 2022, we have a bunch of author talks. Francis Palmer, who's a potter, another art talk. We have Avi Loeb, who's an astrophysicist from Harvard, going to talk about actually his book, Extraterritoriality. We're going to have Brad Rika talk about the true story of later Raiders of the Lost Ark. Jeff Sebo from NYU is going to talk about animals and so forth. It's going to be a wonderful array of programs going forward in 2022. And we have more in the works. We're going to have an antique appraisal by Mike Ivanovich. So that's going to be fun. So I invite everybody to join us. You can go onto our website, sign up for our newsletter. Programs, you can always register for a program, a Zoom program from our website. Coming on Sunday, if you live in North Salem, please stop by the library on the 12th at 1 o'clock to go on a hike with the Open Land Foundation, and then come back and see all the gingerbread houses that are going to be brought to the library and judged, and then hang around for an art reception with the artist Chrysanth Green Gross, whose one work is hanging on the gallery in the library now. This is wonderful. It's a typical, wonderful small town library event, everything and the whole community on Sunday. So just before I turn this over to Ted, I'd like to say that this is the time of the year when we ask people to help the library. Our annual appeal letter has gone out. If you live in North Salem, you should have gotten it. If you don't, you can help us at any rate. You can go onto our website and scroll down to the donate button. We can't put on these programs unless we get help from the community, and we need to raise at least a quarter, if not more, of our operating budget every year through the generosity of people in town and who use our programs. All our programs are free and they're open to anybody. And for them to continue like this, we need donations from the public. So on that note, Ted is a marvelous, wonderful artist and a musician. His work has been called zany, elegant, innovative, classic, abstract, surreal. He's a fine artist, and he takes books, he says, that we're going to recycling, and he makes them into three-dimensional pop art masterpieces. So Ted, why don't you go on now, okay?
Oh, thank you. I don't know that I call them masterpieces, but some of them are pop art. Thank you all for having me, for the invitation, and thanks for your patience last time. My thinking is, I don't know, I can't see everyone who's here. I don't know how familiar you all are with my work, but what I'm going to do is just give you an overall preview of a handful of my pieces. Can you see the screen share?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And also I'm going to stop now and then just to pause on these. My social media tag is @TedWrayArtist. If at any point you want to see more of my work, you want to ask me questions, you want to buy some of my work, you can find me there. I do plan to launch my website next year, but I've been saying that every year for a few years. Anyway, I'm just going to go through a preview here of some of the variety of my work. This was, well, I'm going to discuss each piece, most of the pieces individually later. So these are, if you haven't seen book Excavation, even if you have seen book Excavation, you probably haven't seen work like this before. All of these books were bound for the recycling bin. This one is two-sided, so I'm going to press a little video play here. And here we see both sides of the book cut on both sides. So the front cover and the back cover and both sides of the center spread. So it's 360 degrees. That's why it's on a Lazy Susan there.
It's very small. Can you make it larger?
I'm as large as I can be. Is it very small on everyone?
No, you have to go into, on your own screen, go into your view options and make it larger. I'm seeing it in full screen. Top of your screen, if you're on a laptop or desktop, go into view options. You have to use your cursor, bring it to the top of your screen.
Okay, thank you. I have it. Thank you.
And now, like I said, I'm just scrolling through to give you some examples so you know in advance what we're talking about as I start to get into a little more detail. This was from my show at Gilmer Arts Gallery here in LJ, Georgia. It's a really nice event. I had a solo show in July. And there's another view from that event. Several photos of the same book. I photograph my work a lot and video it a lot because much like, say, the Grand Canyon, you know, you can't really, a photograph doesn't deliver what it is. You know, you can't get the full, anything like the full impact of what you're actually looking at from a single photograph, which is why people have many photographs of, say, the Grand Canyon. Granted, my work's not that big, but similarly, it's hard to grasp. They really do present physically in your presence much more than photographs or even video. This was another one with the custom. This is another one that's a diptych, in other words, two panels, two-sided, so 360 degrees. And that's a custom built shadow box. Really hard to, that was a hard shadow box to engineer, open on both sides. I have to give kudos to my friend Mark Dale, a local woodworker here in LJ, Georgia, who tolerated my pickiness while building that one. I'll talk more as again, I'm just showing you some examples of my work, and I'll get into specifics about the variety of work that I'm sharing here. All of this material is, most of this material is available on my social media. Instagram's probably, well, it has limitations. Instagram and Facebook are where I post the most. But all of these, most of these have several images, some videos. Here's a 2-minute and 20-second video, an in-depth exploration of one of my pieces. I'll talk about it a little bit as I go. Like I said, many photographs from different angles and a lot of zoomed in video just to show you the complexity. Everything you see here was already in the book before I started. I haven't added anything. So even though it looks very complex, I'm actually making the book simpler by removing portions of the book. I used to say that I'm giving the world something it never had before, but in reality, I'm showing something that's always been there differently. Part of my artistic vision includes seeing everyday objects in a new way, seeing an ordinary thing differently. So, you know, we encounter books, most of us encounter books all the time, and they seem to be bricks or boxes, where I'm merely removing portions to show everybody who sees it that the book is not what you think it is. And I pretty much feel that that's the case with everything. As much as we think we know, we really know very little. So I'm trying to invite the idea that I think to some degree, even for myself, a personal humility in that who knew the complexity that's readily available to be seen was always there. I just couldn't see all of it at once. And I'm just kind of riffing. I don't have a script here, obviously. So I'm refining my understanding of my own work as I go. So this video is almost over. Again, this is just a close-up of one specific book that I'm particularly enjoy. And then you're going to get my social media tag once again. And that's the end of the preview. I'm going to go into my background a little bit. And so this is the type of thing I used to draw when I was a teenager. I was a very troubled individual as a teenager, very troubled family life. And I got introduced to Salvador Dali at a young age, and I sort of became obsessed with surrealism. And I was drawing this kind of stuff. I have to acknowledge Joan Barrickman and a student from ACES. I went to Fox Lane High School, but I nearly dropped out as a freshman. Fortunately, they had an alternative high school available, which was ideal for troubled students like myself. I would have become an absolute derelict and a burden to humanity if not for the academic community for educational success, otherwise known as ACES in Bedford Hills. I got a little weepy this afternoon because I was revisiting my high school career. I don't know if you can see it at screen share. This was a high school yearbook for ACES that I drew. You can see the Led Zeppelin Hermit from Zeppelin 4 on the inside. Now that I look at it, I'm a little bit embarrassed, but I was 17 before art school. I was strongly encouraged in all of my artistic pursuits, and my high school yearbook for my graduation year, both my teachers, I just wanted to share some of what they shared. I'm not going to be able to read those while I'm doing this. Anthony Salvia, one of my high school teachers, wrote, "Keep to your music, writing and drawing. Continue to explore your talents. Make us proud." Anthony, keep exploring your talents is not something I was getting from my other teachers, my other high school experience. And I'm not going to read the whole thing from Joan here, but this will always touch me deeply. To Ted, the essence of alternative, a poetic scientist, a scientific poet, master of the visual sound and audio touch. I'm just going to stop there. The reason I'm talking about this is because even back then, I was not just practicing creativity, but in everything I get my hands on, I tried to approach from a different point of view, a different perspective. I would also want to acknowledge a fellow student at ACES. When I was a freshman, she saw some of my work. She was a senior, and she bought me a book on Escher. It was a very generous gift for a senior to give to a punk freshman. But MC Escher, clearly, his work is otherworldly and multidimensional. So that really opened my eyes when I was doing this sort of work. Again, very Salvador Dali-esque, although I wouldn't claim that I had such quality. But for a high school student, it showed potential. These are the images that I had in my portfolio to go to the Connecticut Institute of Art. That was in Greenwich. I believe it was called the Perpersi Institute of Art at the time. Another thing that was very present in my awareness and very frustrating as a young artist was the advice of non-artists all the time. And one of my cousin's husbands, perhaps he was trying to be encouraging, but he really drove home, you need your own style, your own signature, your own fingerprint. These are my words for what he was trying to deliver. And it was very frustrating. I felt lectured to. I was a punk teenager, but that was a message that's clearly important, because to go into the arts is a very, very challenging, competitive, and demanding line of work. So that was a Picasso / Dali inspired image. There's many things to see there. I'm not going to point them all out. And then this was the same image with watercolor applied. And when I was at the the Connecticut Institute of Art, I got passionate about pastel painting. This was a quick little 5-minute sketch of my father. This was a vignette of a self-portrait. This was my ex-wife in Florida has this. This was a painting I did from a photograph of our cat. And that's another pastel portrait that I did of a friend's wife sleeping on her couch. I wasn't present while she was sleeping. It was from a photograph. But this is just an example of that I'm not entirely an outsider artist, that this is some of my artistic background. And for a time, I thought that I might be a portrait artist. Again, I didn't feel like as a portrait artist, it felt too competitive of a field for me to pursue. So that was up until most of this work was up until the early 1990s. And then in the year 2000, actually it was 1999 that I quit my day job, was a professional musician in all throughout Tampa Bay area for 20 years. And there's stories galore there, but my artistic journey pretty much gets put on pause, except for a few of these pieces I did back then. But now I'm going to go into more depth about my current work. In around 2013, before 2013, I was already burnt out as a professional musician. And I sort of went within and asked the muses, which I'm just going to refer to the muses, you know, sort of an aspect of a greater consciousness, let's say, a creative aspect, for guidance, because I knew that I had creative gifts, but I was feeling stifled. And the work of Brian Detmer entered my mind shortly thereafter. My agreement with the source of consciousness or the muses was, whatever crazy idea pops into my head, if it seems like a calling, I will do my best to honor it, no matter how crazy it seems. And I had tried to sell a bunch of my used books that were of no value to me to a local used bookstore, and they said, we can't use these. They were some of them were like obsolete psychology books from, say, the 1960s, this one for instance. And so after asking the muses for guidance, you know, Brian Detmer's work entered my mind, and I'm laying there thinking, what could I do differently with creative, you know, what could I do differently with books? I had also, part of my history that I skipped, I had 12 years in the printing industry between high school and my music career, where I learned a lot about paper and how to manipulate it. And with art school, I was also fascinated with paper. So anyway, I'm laying in bed thinking about what I could do differently with books to bring my own signature to work similar to Brian Detmer's. I've respected and admired his work, but I didn't want to duplicate it. And as I'm laying in bed contemplating what I could do differently, the voice or thought, the notion arrived, stop dreaming and start cutting. So I got out of bed immediately and started cutting books. Shortly thereafter, this was the first piece that emerged, and I got excited about it because I knew something interesting and new and fresh could be done. Continued to cut books for a few years until this one emerged. This one is the one that when I picked it up and the pages bent kind of like what we see here, and the three-dimensionality, the depth of the book revealed itself more deeply, I knew that I was onto something really interesting and not just novel, but I find it fascinating, and I hear that others do too. So I was this was the first one that really spoke to a brand new thing to me that was not just novel, but interesting. And so, and it was after a few years of cutting and cutting, wondering why on earth am I doing this? But I made a promise that I would honor the muse's call. A few more copies, images of the same one. This is about the third piece that I did. This one I went in from behind the book. So having previewed the book, I saw that most of the images that I was interested were behind it. I'm sorry, on page 2. In other words, the reverse side. So that's why I cut from the back cover on that one. I realize there are many aspects of each of these books that I could discuss, but I'm not going to just now. This one, I decided that I was, like I said, I'm not adding anything to the book. Everything that you see was already there, especially with the images, with the colored ones. I'm going to back up since I'm here. This was the first one that I did that was completely non-representational. I didn't want anything to be recognized, like, you know, to spot anything recognizable, totally abstract. It's also the first one where the binding of the book is on the top. My work is evolving. Each one, I'm discovering what it has to offer. And I don't really map them out. I don't plan them in advance. I do preview the books and see, yes, this is a colorful book. It's an exciting book. It's an interesting book. And I hope that I land on this image, but sometimes I don't know that because I might hide it in the margins on a previous one. I decided to go black and white, and I was just capturing the letter O, hoping that the mind would allow us not to recognize the letter O, but see circles. And this one is another very early piece. It's a few years old, and I haven't advanced it since here because the pages tangle together as I continue to work on it. Now, I have engineered a solution to that in my mind, but I've been so busy with other things, I haven't gotten back around to it. I do find it really interesting how it's filling out, and we will see more work in my later slides that are reminiscent of this. Just more examples of my work progressing. Nobody's doing this as far as I know. There are other book sculptors. Book excavation art is sort of the subgenre because it speaks clearly that I'm excavating the book. There are a variety. If you were to Google book sculptures, you're going to see a lot of work that's not book excavation. You know, some of it's folding. There's a variety. Since I'm sort of inventing things as I go, I don't have a language for this stuff. But these diagonal lines, the best word I can come up with for it is they're isolated. I trace my previous cuts on each page. You know, one way to describe my work would be that each page becomes the frame for each subsequent page. When I want to isolate an image and not continue to trace it, it requires a totally different approach. It complicates the whole thing as far as the work is concerned. I don't know that I can articulate, but you'll see in a lot of my work that there's the ripple effect or the echo, the repeated strata art, layer after layer, echoing each other. But then there's these isolated images that I decide to not repeat or echo. And one thing to my advantage to do that is I don't consume all the real estate. There's only so much real estate on each page. Each time I cut another layer, I'm reducing the amount of space I have to work with. So as I do these isolated images, and then keeping them isolated by not echoing or tracing, repeating their imagery, I'm saving space, which creates a screen through which we can see it creates interest. This is a book where it was a book on book design. It was an award book by Graphics that was awards for, you know, the best book design of 1991 or whatever. Excuse me. I'm going to zoom in. This is an old photograph, so please pardon the resolution. But this is a book sculpture within a book sculpture. That was my plan. This one unfortunately doesn't translate as well as seeing it in person. These photographs are not doing these particular pieces justice. This is one of the earliest books that, it's not the first, but what I'm having here, I'm calling this a bloom, because again, there's no language for this. Rather than cut this margin on every page, I fold the margin, and that reveal, you know, the page folds outward, and then I get to continue sculpting. I'm giving myself a little more real estate to work with. I'm enlarging the size of the footprint of the book, and it allows me to have more interesting images to play with on the outside of the book. I'm open to questions at any time. Again, it's easy for me to ramble about this stuff. I don't know how familiar you guys are with my work. Angie, can you ask those questions online? This is a work by Dorothy Gillespie. This is a work of mine based on the work of Dorothy Gillespie. The book is Dorothy Gillespie's work, and a lot of her work involves ribbons. We're gonna have to mute that, I think. I'm sorry. Can you? So my aim here was to emulate her work by creating ribbons coming out of the book. This is still a work in progress. I started it a while back. It's yet to be finished. A lot of the work that I have, a lot of the books that I have are illustration source books. They are collections of illustrations from a variety of artists, mostly for corporations. Maybe I want to hire an artist to do my company logo, or it's a showcase for artists, basically. So I have a bunch of these books, and this is one of them. And you may be familiar with some of the imagery, except here, let's see. Yeah, here the illustrator reversed American Gothic, put the man in the dress and put the woman in the suit, in the man's clothing. And what I did with paper was I cut, I'm going to zoom in. I cut the lace around her collar, his collar, and continued repeating that. So one thing that's interesting about the layered pages is that I can incorporate the depth into the illustration, the imagery. Another example is here. This wasn't the shirt that was inside the jacket. This was an image that appeared after I cut it out. And it looks to me like, you know, 1980s pop art t-shirt. And I decided to keep that there. If I had continued cutting, there were aliens. There was an image of aliens that I thought would have been really interesting, but I didn't risk it because I didn't know exactly if it would line up in the cuts. Angie, if you want to give me those questions, I can try to read them while talking. Angie, my girlfriend and wonderful rock and companion, who's just been my rock through an awful lot of my challenges, is offering me questions. Do you keep the pages intact? Keep pages intact? Well, I destroy them. I keep the book intact. The bound edge stays bound. I remove a portion of the center. When I'm done, I glue the unbound edit.
Ted, we're
Yep.
getting a very bad echo. You might have two computers open. And I just want you to know there's a whole bunch of questions in the chat.
Okay,
waiting for you. So I
okay,
don't know
so
if you can
these
open
came
it or-
from, Angie just told me she got these from the chat, so apparently she's previewing them for me because she knows which ones that I might field readily. How do I cut with such precision? I don't know, practice. Do you create a plan for what you cut and what you leave before you start cutting? I don't create a detailed plan. I have something of an aim, but I don't count on it. You know, it's kind of like planning your day. Every now and then surprises show up. And sometimes I incorporate something I didn't plan to incorporate. Other times I will have to sacrifice what I hoped would stay. What do you use to separate the pages and provide depth? Air. When the book is done, I've engineered a way to, I bend the pages, I keep them, I've figured out a way to fasten them while they're bent. Then I glue the unbound edge. And then when the glue dries, I unbend them. When I unbend them, you know, the ones that are, since they're glued, they stay at least partially bent. Do you deconstruct the book first to make it easier to work with? No, I don't. For some reason, I'm a glutton for punishment. I give myself the biggest challenges and then I live with the consequences. Now and then I'll remove a page completely if it has no relevant anything to offer of interest. Some of my books a few of my books I have unbound completely and then sculpted and then put spacers around completely around all sides. But generally, in that case, I don't call it a book sculpture. I'm gonna have to come up with a term for, I think strata art is the correct term. But what lost my train of thought. I don't remove anything. If there's a page that I might remove a page completely, or I might just cut a larger image around it. So it may stay in the book to provide more space between the pages. But I don't reveal any of that page within the final product. This is the back half of this book. As I said, this is an illustration source book. And when I was done carving it, when I ran out of real estate, when I ran out of space from which to remove any more, I was only halfway through the book. So then I cut down the spine, essentially turning it into two separate books. And, you know, part of my mission is to keep books from going into the dumpster or the recycling bin. So I had a half a book left over, and that was the result of that. This book is unique. This was the first one that I did the outward fold. This is also unique in that rather than bending the book and then gluing it while it was bent, I glued in pieces of mat board between each page. So rather than being shaped like a bow, the overall profile of the book or the view from above, the bird's eye view, is more of a wedge or a triangle than the bow, because rather than adding the space to the middle by bowing it, I added the space to the far margin by gluing little strips of mat board between each piece. I'm careful to use acid-free artist quality material so that the books are enduring. I just realized time is passing really fast and I've been asked for a demonstration. This is so difficult to describe my work in a fast manner because it's so involved. I do have a demonstration video. It's about 8 minutes, but I'm going to try to run through this stuff quickly. This one I could describe further. This one was the first one where this part of the book is called The Gutter. This piece is called Gutter Flowers because this was the first book that I didn't keep the margin on the gutter. I was allowing the gutter, I was cutting an organic shape out of the gutter to let it become, a very three-dimensional part of the overall image, the overall piece. It's not finished. A lot of this work, you're seeing a lot of work that nobody's seen before. Some of the stuff I've shared in progress on social media. This is an example of both gutter flowers and outward folding. So this book was approximately 9 by 9 square. And now with, if you unfold the 9 by 9 square, you get 18 by 9. And with the outward folds, and the outward folds actually come forward. So this piece is very three-dimensional, very three-dimensional. There's a little video coming up of that piece. So that was my slideshow of a variety of my work. Now I'm going to go into the demo portion. My computer seems to be misbehaving. Trying to get into a different I may have to boot my close and open my photo app. So you're going to look at if it cooperates. Are there any, why doesn't somebody ask me some more questions from the chat that I can field at least while I'm at this sort of standstill? Yeah, my photo app is completely locked up. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, here's a few questions, Ted. Some people have asked, where do you source your books? I'm just going to say a few of them at a time. What kind of glue do you use? And I think somebody was saying it could be very hard on your hands, all the cutting you do. I apologize if I've missed other questions, folks. The first page or the last.
And Angie just said she found one that said, do you start with your first page or the last? So where I get my books, my first books I got from the Book Swap in Palm Harbor. A friend of mine manages a used bookstore in Palm Harbor, Florida. She knew that I was, she's the one that I tried to offload some of my library that was no longer of value to me, and she couldn't use them. So I said, fine, I'll turn them into art. She started setting aside books for me that she knew she had no market value for. She knows her clientele, they're not going to sell them at her bookstore, and she didn't want to warehouse them. So she passed them on to me. So a lot of my work, a lot of my books come from there. A lot of my books I bid on eBay, and I keep my bids below $3 generally, unless it's a real book I really want. They ship it to me for $3, free shipping. I know that book is not high demand, and they can't warehouse them for very long either. So that's bound for the recycling bin. I get a lot of my books at thrift stores. So thrift stores, used bookstores, and eBay are my main go-tos for books. What kind of glue do I use? The brand I use, Mod Podge. It's affordable and it's archival. Archival meaning it has no acid in it. It won't change the color of the pages over time. There was another question.
There's one, how fragile are they?
And you just read one, how fragile are they? Well, they're as fragile as a book, maybe more fragile, because I've reduced, I do, this work certainly compromises the integrity of the structure. So, I mean, I've trusted paper to be stronger than it was and suffered as a consequence. But I do my best, and this is one of the reasons why I have these custom shadow boxes built. I regret that my computer's locked up. There must be too much going on, because I really wanted to show you that when they're done, to bring them to market, I have to make sure that I'm customer service also. So if I sell you a piece and it gets damaged, I'm responsible for it. I really don't want to deal with that. I want you to be happy with a permanent piece of art. So I do my best to make sure that it's as secure in the shadow box as possible. And like I said, there are two woodworkers, Mark Dale here in Ellijay, and my good friend Josh Gibson, who's a master craftsman woodworker in St. Petersburg, Florida. They've tolerated my demanding standards for building these shadow boxes that basically, once they're in the shadow box, I want them to be, permanent. Some of them won't go into shadow boxes. Also with the shadow boxes, I do get museum quality glass, which has a UV ultraviolet light coating. So it protects it from ultraviolet light. It's still not a good idea to park them in direct sunlight, but it will reduce the fading over time. To some degree, my work is vulnerable to, the quality of the publisher. When they use quality paper, when there's heavy duty paper, I love it. I love cutting through heavy duty paper. There are some magazines that I wanted to share. It's all on my social media. But I'm not as confident with the quality of magazine paper.
Do you work with books that have glued bindings or sewn?
Good, okay. Do I work with books that have glued binding or sewn? I definitely prefer the Smith sewn because those are far more durable. I'm surprised that I have a lot of books from National Geographic. I mean, nice looking quality hardbound volumes. They're actually glued binding. And I've spent hours cutting through a book before I even realized that it was glued and not sewn, and the thing fell apart. So I definitely prefer sewn books. Now and then, if they're glued, I don't mind unbinding them to re-glue them later. I've done that with two pieces in particular. If you're following me on social media, you'll see I'm working on an Escher piece. That one has been unbound completely, and I've added 3/16 of an inch spacers between each page. So a book that started out to be 1/4 of an inch deep is now 1 foot deep. But it's about 54 layers and it's about 1 foot deep. So it can no longer be called a book. I wish that I could show you images. I'm so sorry that my computer locked up. Okay, so let's see if I can, now it seems to be cooperating, maybe. I can't close my photo app. Let me force quit. And now you'll see my messy desktop. And if I reopen my photos, I can resume the tour. Okay, here's the demo. Unless there's another question that someone wants to ask me, I see a hand over here.
How do you affix them inside the shadow box?
How do I
Glue, staple, wood, dowels.
How do I affix them inside the shadow box? Glue,
Staple,
staples,
wood,
wood,
or dowel.
or dowels. I shim the shadow box tightly with foam core or mat board. I have the custom shadow boxes built. I think that they're quality woodworkers, so I couldn't tell you how they're secured. They're not screwed or nailed, clearly. Once I fit the book in there, I make sure that it's snug, very tight from the top and the bottom with high quality foam core board and or mat board. So that way it's just stable, it's just held into place. And then I'll shim the sides, and then of course the back panel. Once I know that it's snug in there, I attach the back panel, maybe some more foam core or mat board to hold it snug from front to back. And then it gets, just typical turn buttons to hold the back of the shadow box. I realize we're running out of time, so I'm going to play the video. I've sped up this video considerably. And this is a demonstration of the actual work. I wouldn't normally do this, but it was part of what I was requested to share when I was invited to share my work here. So this is me just randomly cutting in a pattern intuitively, organically into the front cover of this is a paperback book. This book is called Spectrum. What Spectrum is there's a series of fantasy, sci-fi illustration books. They're like award best of sci-fi and fantasy illustration of the year. Spectrum sort of showcases the greatest artists of that genre annually. This is number 9, and this is just me. This is showing you, again, this is sped up anywhere from 200% to 2000% at different times. This is me inspecting the quality of to make sure that I cut all the way through before I remove the cut. I push it through rather than pull it through to make sure that any hanging chads, I increase the likelihood of the hanging chads. Now I was just previewing the next pages before cutting this page. When there's white margin, I try to cut the white as closely to the previous cut as possible, because there's so much white in most of these books. I want it to be more interesting than that. So again, this is me just sort of tracing what I've already cut. My hand cuts from left to right, but I cut the book from right to left. So when I cross through the previous cut, I'm not risking tearing the page into the final piece. If it tears, it's tearing into the waste or the part that I remove. And it's funny, I say waste. I don't waste this stuff. Someday I may make collages of it, or I may pass it on to a collage artist. I have there are some really remarkable collage artists that I follow on Instagram. And I have a massive inventory now of very interesting images. Here you can see again, this is sped up considerably, but I'm very carefully choosing which images stay in and then very carefully cutting them out. Again, this is sped up, really sped up. The reason I sped it up is because generally when I start a book, the very first cut of the page probably takes well over an hour, just the very first cut. And the first few layers do too, because I'm getting a feel for the book. I'm paying attention to how carefully I want to follow the original cut. You know, I could alter the shape of the frame, if you will, at any stage of the game. You'll see I'm using a glove on my left hand here just to avoid acids or oils from my skin naturally, because I have to handle the book so much. Although I won't wear one on my right hand, I don't spend a whole lot of time with my right hand on the part of the work that stays. Any other questions? More questions?
What do you cut with?
What do I cut with? Excellent question. My main go-to is generally they're referred to as X-Acto knives, right? Although the handle is by X-Acto, the blades themselves, I found the highest quality that I could find from a brand called Excel Blades, and it's spelled like it sounds, EXCELL Blades. They're a manufacturer in New Jersey. I found them online. They're considerably more expensive than other hobby blades, but they're quality steel. They last me much longer. They're consistently sharper. So I don't waste. I have tons of other blades. They're such low quality that I don't even bother with them. Those are my main tools. Now and then, rarely will I use scissors. Usually if I've finished a piece and it's already glued and set, and I see one little thing I want to remove, if I can't reinforce it and get behind it with a cutting mat and use the blade, I might use a pair of scissors and have to freehand it.
First a statement and then followed by a question. The paper arts and the cutting you do is hard on one's body, especially hands, back, and neck. What do you do to limit your injuries? What do you do to help minimize injury and pain? For example, your desk setup.
I haven't brought too much attention to that question. Did you hear the question? It was about what I do to maintain my health, basically, ergonomically. What do I do to make sure that I'm not destroying my body? I'm good at destroying my body, which is why I retired from music. One of the reasons I retired from music. Now and then my right index finger gets a little annoyed. You know, I don't have arthritis. That's been confirmed. What I do is basically, I work at a desk that the height is pretty reasonable. I probably could raise it a little higher. Perhaps I'm being careless. I don't bring too much attention to it. I have learned exactly how much pressure to apply to the blade. You know, some people can write really hard, really dark. I've learned how to apply the appropriate amount of force based on the thickness of the paper that I'm cutting.
What makes a good book for your work?
What makes a good book for my work? Well, one, it has to have no value otherwise. You know, some people might say, I can't believe you're cutting that science fiction book, you know, but you know what, like I said, I found it on eBay for a very low cost. If no one beat me to the price, then it wasn't that much in demand. Generally, what makes a good book for me, the ideal book is high quality, colorful, high quality paper, colorful images. Lately, I'm really enjoying doing a hardcover books. So I have to cut through the front of the hardcover. Hardcover books are more stable, but I still love working at paperbacks. Basically, if a book sings to me, I mean, part of my tour, which unfortunately we won't get to, has a picture of my studio with just tons and tons and tons of books, which I have waiting for me to select and carve, yet I still shop. So that's the end of the demonstration of a few pages. This is the condition of the book a few days after what you just saw the end of the video. I just segued like totally gracelessly. That was the demo you just saw. This was the condition of the book at the end of the demo. That's the condition of the book several days later. The red is just a spacer to show. Without the red, that's what it looks like. That's the next page waiting for me to cut it. I don't know why this book is in that slideshow. So quickly, here are some images of other books that I've done. These are the progress. So it's just showing you different degrees of completion. I wish that we had more time. If you guys, at the end of this, I will post once again at Ted Wray Artist. You can find me on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. I don't mind doing this. I love doing this. Hopefully I'll get more graceful learning how to do this. But I could talk about this stuff forever. And people apologize to ask me questions. I could talk about my work inexhaustibly. Here's a hardcover. That's without the hardcover with a few layers cut. That's another layer cut with the matte board and with a piece of matte between it so you can get a clearer image. So this is the progress of a book. That's the end result. But then I did the fold out side too. I'll take a few more questions unless the library needs to.
No, Ted, we're delighted. We'd love to have you stay and answer questions. Please do if anybody has any.
I just want to say you are a genius. This has been mesmerizing. I could watch this for hours. I mean, you need your own television show. It really is amazing. You are so talented. It's beyond belief. Thank you for sharing.
Your taste is impeccable. Thank you.
It is, you're right.
I agree, Ted, and I, if you were to go to the Dali Museum in St. Pete or any of the major museums anywhere with your shadow boxes, even unannounced, I think as soon as the museum people saw it, I mean, they would give you a show. It's really amazing.
Ron, when are you going to get a job at a museum?
One quick question. Of course, if there were a picture book of Dali, for example, would you consider cutting a Dali book that has page after page of his work?
I've already done it twice. One has been sold to a friend in Wesley Chapel, not too far from you. The other piece is still in progress. I have several Dali books that are just waiting for my blade.
Okay, well, I'll give other people a chance to ask questions, and I'll see you Saturday.
I'm looking forward to it, Ron.
Me too.
Are you confronted with any publishing or copyright issues?
I haven't been yet, as I understand it, regarding this composite type art. Since I'm not using it for advertising, I'm not using someone's branded image to say, shop at Sue's or whatever. I'm not encountering those issues. Lots of people, collage artists, you'll see Disney images, and Disney are like the biggest whip crackers as far, they crack the whip the most regarding copyright infringement. And I see tons of Disney in collage artistry. So I haven't yet encountered any. And if there's a lawsuit about my work, more publicity. This is a quick little video of a sacrifice I had to make. I want to share this. I did all that lace cutting. I call it lace, all that fine cutting, but it was blocking so much of the imagery behind it that I had to remove it. So I videotaped me removing it, I recorded myself removing it just to sort of, because I was hiding so much interesting work behind it. These are more pieces in progress. So I don't work just in color. The black and white imagery is really interesting. I do have a section that I wanted to share called Found Poetry. Ladies from the library, stop me at any time, because I could go on and on and on. Another question.
Approximately how many hours for you to complete a project?
Approximately how many hours for me to complete a project? I've done a few in less than 24 hours. Some of my projects have taken upwards of 80 hours, probably even more than that.
And how many projects do you have in progress at a time?
A dozen pieces in progress at a time, at least. I'd say there's probably 24 in the studio at the moment. Speaking of in progress, this is an image that no one has ever seen. This is my Norman Rockwell work in progress. If you're a fan of Norman Rockwell, you might recognize some of the images. However, if I didn't point out that it was Norman Rockwell, you might not have recognized it because I've totally corrupted what he's done.
It looks like Rockwell.
Now, for some reason, I'm seeing, okay, I'm not going to worry about it. This is a book of skyscrapers. So it's about, the book itself is 18 inches tall by about 12 inches wide. And this that looks like a fishbone is actually the vertical here is the corner of a building, and the diagonals and the horizontals are each story of the building, the sort of the outline of the building. I try to bring something new and interesting to each piece. This is interesting that I wanted to share. I'm going to share found poetry. Sometimes I'll get to a page with text, and what I'll do is I'll corrupt the text and call it found poetry. So this reads, around the world, ideas can be enjoyed. The more you practice, the more you enjoy your ability. Read and become an expert. Since we're working with the library here, I'm a book lover. I wouldn't be involved with this if I didn't love books. And I want to encourage people to read also, but that's not part of my mission. But these found poetry things, very often they turn into word salad, a bunch of nonsense sometimes, but sometimes they say something that I want to say. You know, you can see here that I've removed, I'm going to zoom in, I've removed
Yeah. Uh-huh.
words to make this, you know, when I come to a page that has text and I think I want to turn it into a poem, I'll turn off the music, I'll get on my reading glasses instead of my cutting glasses, and I'll look at the page trying to reconfigure all the words in sequence, and I'll come up with a variety of different word salads until I come up with the crazy thing that pleases me the most.
Mhm.
Now, in this case, I actually fed this sheet of paper through the image of the typewriter that I cut, so that the page is from a different page, and I fed it into the typewriter. And I was heartbroken that I had to remove it, because once I bent it, it shifted everything. That's another thing about my work. The bending and gluing is probably similar to a person who works in clay, glazing their work, putting it into the kiln, not knowing exactly how it's going to come out of the kiln. When I bend my work and glue it, I don't know how it's going to look when it lays flat again. Each page gets shifted at, you know, anywhere from a 1/16 of an inch to an 1/8 of an inch. So like I said, a lot of my work is the discovery. So this is the same book after I had to remove the typed found poetry. And this is also a 360-degree piece. So carved on both sides, convex and concave.
Okay.
This is a case where I liked the pattern of the umbrella, but later I had to remove it because it was just blocking too much. So I was going to keep the umbrella, just every other panel of the umbrella, the stripes, and I was working behind it. And I can zoom in and show you. I think I can zoom in. Nope, I'm overloading my computer with too much activity. It's not giving me the zoom in option, and it's locked up again.
Have you ever thought of just selling photographs of your work? I mean, photographs, I mean, even on a small computer screen are fascinating, but if they were blown up, I think they'd make incredible posters like the
What are
one
they
with
worth to
word
you?
art. What?
What are they worth to you?
I think they'd really be worth a lot. I mean, I could see that one with the typewriter that has the found poem in it being like an incredible poster. It's just, I'd love to see that huge. I don't know how it would translate, but my imagination makes me think that it would be incredible.
To some degree, there's the unfortunate for me, probably fortunate for everyone else, social media, you know, I mean, photographs. Yes, I think I hear you that a print enlarged and framed would be very nice. It is an idea. I don't know who could photograph them to my satisfaction. Another question.
You would have to take up photography.
When working with a hardcover book, do you remove the cover or cut through it?
I do both. This is a hardcover that I cut through. Again, my photo, I'm gonna have to force quit my photo app and reopen it. I will show examples once I get my photo app opened up again. That's strange. See, I see these yellow lines? I must have selected edit while I was working, and there it's staying. It's staying. Anyway. Back to the photo gallery. These are hard covers that I have cut through, right? You can clearly, I cut through the hard cover.
I can't hear him now.
Hear me? Can you hear me?
We can now.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
So here's a hard cover that has not been cut through. So in some cases, if I find the end pages interesting, I'll leave them intact, and it'll be a pedestal piece where you can see, you know, the left side in the book has to stay open to be viewed. And in other cases, there's a window, you know, I cut a window into the hardcover. Here are some different versions of the same book. That and that are the same book. So to some degree, the content of the book, to a large degree, the content of the book dictates the composition, but not completely. Here's side by side. And because I kept the image of the woman, they look similar, but they're very different. And I kept this other elements in both of them, but they're very different pieces. Here's an example of another hardcover that I didn't cut through the cover, a little video. So the video sort of helps demonstrate the three-dimensional quality to some degree. But this book is so busy, it's hard to tell. This one we've seen earlier when my computer first locked up. This is a panoramic of the one that had the gutter flowers plus the fold outs. I have a series of books of graffiti art, and this is one of the graffiti art books.
What do you place under each page while you cut it?
What do I place under each page while I cut it? A cutting mat. That was sort of what I'd consider a trade secret that I was never going to reveal, because all of my processes, everything that I've done, I've had to learn on my own. It's like harmonica. If you want to learn how to do it, you're not going to find someone to teach you. You just got to do it. I've made up all my processes, and I used to use cardboard or something, but that didn't endure. I've decided that I don't need to keep all of my secrets, because if you want to do this work, knock yourself out. So that's the same book we just looked at in a larger view. These are two examples of the same book. That's pretty obvious, though. They look the same to some degree because I approached them similarly. Backing up. Yes, so the video I just showed you of Graffiti LA, which I'll quickly burn through, that and this are the two different versions of the same original book.
Wow.
This is Graffiti Brazil, and so is that. So these are the same book, different results. I'm making different decisions on what I keep and what I remove from page to page. Found poetry. So this is when I encounter text that I find interesting. This was from one of the illustration source books, but I saw the words. This was a review of a play, right? But I just like it reads, survive the treacherous terrain of humanity's foibles. I couldn't tell you what it used to say, but I like that end result. This is from a few different pages combined. My opinion ignores the mostly beautiful depiction of a shared imaginary delirium. To some degree, it speaks to the sign of our times. This speaks to me in approaching my work. This was an age of excitement and growing risk. It was also a time of experimentation. This is from one of the graffiti books. And sometimes it's just a blurb like artists' ideas and language. Okay, this one's a mouthful, so bear with me. Artists and writers dedicated to growth of the present world's need to understand its elements, such as quality and powerful expression. I'm sorry, I'm gonna say that again because I skipped the verb. Artists and writers are dedicated to growth of the present world's need to understand its elements, such as quality and powerful
No.
expression.
Wait a minute, I'm
Some
on-
writers have
Go away, go away, go away. So people will see you. And
It's frozen. We can't hear you.
This is word salad for you right here. When you shape the way part of the most beautiful elements interplay in a manner that is clear, all they can think is Smith's pictures didn't much make a statement he wanted to convey. I like these sort of nonsensical word salads. Life relies on spontaneous action of energy coming from you. You have to learn to solve the problem in terms of relative comparison, but the pressures are great. You have to be accurate with still more flexibility. Work the good. You can make some changes again. It's not punctuated, but you can read it how you want it. I've shared that one with you already. I like this one. Look, really look. See an extraordinary thing. It is hypnotic and moving. It is emotional. I love this view. This speaks to the science, to our times. We live in an age of confusion. Because the books is now called The Sensational Water Torture. I knew the sensational water torture was coming a few pages later, so I kept the word bring home there. I'm seeing that my internet connection's unstable. I hope everything's okay. Bring home the sensational water torture. I like that. Meaning might be entirely in question. I know the darkness too. So there's my sort of salute to the Jungian shadow. And one last one. Seek answers of philosophical knowledge as opposed to assumptions. I can't drive that one home quite enough. There's a question.
Ted, do you have a favorite cut book that you've created? Have you had a book you've worked on for several days that you ended up not being happy with the results? If yes, what did you do with the book?
I do have some favorites. Most of my favorites have been sold. So one's in San Francisco, one is in, Stephanie bought here in Georgia. Let's see. Part of my view is blocked. Yes, I've worked on books that I didn't continue to love. It's funny because when I post images of them now and then, people say, "Ooh, I really like that one," and I keep them and I offer them for sale because everyone has different taste. You know, I did an atlas that I didn't love the result of, and a lot of people really like it. I'm surprised with how many people like the black and white ones. So, you know, I have my taste. Oh, here's one of my favorites. This is the one that Stephanie and Steven bought. This one's here in Georgia, but I don't have it anymore. Another friend just asked if they could buy this one. I'm sorry, I already sold it. I mean, I had to tell her I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. This one was the one that got me the blue ribbon at the Gilmer Arts juried show in January of 2021. this year. So this portion, I'm displaying shadow boxes. This was a prototype shadow box. This one is owned, I don't know, I can't see who's here, but Frank and Jeannie Domino. This was Jeannie's Christmas present to Frank last year. So this is in Connecticut. There's the Dali one, Ron. This one is down in Wesley Chapel. This one was only about 14 layers. So what happens is page 1 became page number 15. You know, the waste from the center now became the back page. So as I'm cutting each layer, it goes behind subsequently. So that's how we see so many images from the same original image repeated layer after layer. That one's, and this is me demonstrating the shadow boxes. I apologize for this yellow stripe. I don't know why it's on my computer. It's superseding everything. But this is one of the shadow box designs with accent board behind the shadow box. This one's my first international sale. It's in Canada. I see there's a question.
A comment and a question, just mostly. Your work is amazing. Have you heard of This is Colossal? This
Yeah.
would be a good way to have an article of your work get out to a larger audience and be shown to a receptive audience for your work, and there's a link attached.
Thank you very much. I am familiar with This is Colossal. I have a bunch of curators to pursue, you know, to get my work launched more publicly. Board Panda being another one, Juxtapose and High Fructose being others. So these are different shadow box examples. Again, this was a National Geographic magazine. Those are my least favorite to work on. I have a series that I'll show you in a moment. There's another shadow box. These are the pedestal pieces where they're not going to go into a shadow box. The hard covers, I don't remove the back of the hardcover. And as such, you know, the thing is going to be at least, say, anywhere from 6 to 8 inches deep, wide. So there's no shadow box that's going to accept that. So these, I call them fish tanks. These display cases, you can find them at Michael's. I need to find more vendors of these type things. I'm about to bring about 3 or 4 of the, actually about 6 of these to Florida with me. And I really don't want to travel with these glass cases, but smaller versions. When I was doing my show at Gilmer Arts, it struck me that the pedestal was too low. So I removed from my inventory some of my encyclopedias just to raise them up. And I think it added a nice little touch to those pieces. That was not my idea. That was a good friend of mine's idea. So that's one of the pedestal pieces. This will be available for sale in Florida next week. Most of these pieces will. Again, I don't know who's online right now, but some of our good friends, Vin and Amy Sabera, bought this one. You'll see more images of it soon. It's another surrealist artist named Patrick Woodruff, collection of his work. So these are demonstrating the dome. Some people really like the dome, some people don't. I'm ambivalent about them because they're kind of cool, but from certain angles, they really obstruct the view. They warble the view. And these are some hard covers that are just freestanding. They really should be protected, especially since people want to touch them. Even adults seem to have trouble keeping their hands off them. I was pleased with how Gilmer Arts provided these table easels. I was pleased with how cool they looked on the table easels. This book is a tiny little book that I cut and installed into an old encyclopedia. This was going to be part of my talk earlier, and I realized we're way over time. Are we okay? Can't hear you.
We're good. We're good,
I
Ted.
was unmuted. Hi, Ted, it's Carolyn. How about another, I don't know, 5 minutes, and then we'll stop.
I'm happy to continue, but it's your call. Yeah, more. I'll give you 5 minutes, no problem. Here it is. So this is a tiny little book that I cut for Angie for Christmas. and I wanted to do something unique with it. So I had this old encyclopedia, and to a degree, it is heartbreaking to ruin these old encyclopedias, but the information is so obsolete and it is available online, and old books are just high maintenance if you want to keep them well. So what I did was I cut a frame into the encyclopedia and installed a little hardcover book, cut a larger, about a quarter of an inch deeper of the size of the hardcover of the small book to embed it into the encyclopedia, then glued it shut. So this little hardcover is embedded securely into the encyclopedia. This is one of the latest shadow box designs, and I really like this one. I hear someone talking. Is there a question that I'm ignoring, that I'm not receiving? These last few are coming with me, so to Florida. If anyone wants to buy them, come see me on Saturday night at the St. Pete Winter Market. Here are, I have a few different series of books. I have a bunch of graffiti books. You've seen some of these before already tonight, but this was Graffiti Brazil, 2 different versions. That's another view showing you the depth of the one that I used the mat board for rather than bending and gluing. That one. You've seen, this is one version of Graffiti LA, another version of Graffiti LA. This is one version of Graffiti Women. This is Graffiti World. No, yeah, this is Graffiti World, Graffiti Argentina. What do you see here? Besides a woman, what 2 things are what two obvious things? So this was a National Geographic magazine that I was able to corrupt the G and find the word Corona. This is National Geographic's logo, but I did a Corona series. And one of the things I like about the Corona series is there are so many pharmaceutical ads in front of a Nat Geo that I was able to, incorporate some of the found poetry, sudden trouble breathing, ask your doctor, doctor recommended, and then there were other things that everybody should be questioning more. A lot of the found poetry from throughout the book, into the unknown, ready for action, symptoms consistent with disease. And forgive me if I'm being politically incorrect. I'm very realist, let's say, about the vicissitudes and challenges we face just to be alive. That I'm not very delicate sometimes, let's say. So so this is my Corona series of National Geographics. There's 4 of those, and they all are very ominous. They all have very dark fragments or cautionary fragments of verbiage. This is my first in my graphic novel series. This was called Magic Pickle originally, and it was it's my most popular YouTube video, probably because I titled it Magic Pickle. It must have a following of cartoon, comic book readers who all thought they were going to see Magic Pickle, and they saw that instead. But these are 3 different or 4 different graphic novels. Then I have an organic series where I wanted to, this was a book of photographs. I didn't want you to recognize anything from a photograph, but I wanted to have an interesting texture. So this one's called Spanish Moss for obvious reasons. The overall appearance is of Spanish moss. And this is from the same series of just, this is actually or either organic or abstract expressionist series, because it's almost like if Jackson Pollock were doing this stuff, he might have something like that as a result. So I think that's it for the organic series. And again, I treat each book differently. Like this one, rather than keeping a margin, I'll remove. I try to innovate with every single piece, do something different with every single piece. So that is essentially my show. I I won't
This
go
is
on.
wonderful. Ted, thank you. This is absolutely marvelous. It's fascinating and you're so talented. Thank you.
You're very
Um,
kind. Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thank
If
you,
you-
everybody, for tuning in, and I'm sure he would take email questions and all sorts of inquiries if you wanted to talk to him more or discuss with him, and come back to the rest of our programs, please, and contribute and help the library keep these things going. Thank you, Ted. Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
everybody. I was honored to be a part of it. Thank you for the invitation, and I'm not hard to find on social media, so I'd love to hear from you.
Okay, great.
Merry
Thank you.
Christmas, everybody.
Merry
Night,
Christmas.
Ted.
Good night.